The way I like to think of it is movement creates momentum. Momentum creates initiation or initiative. So if we're feeling stuck, it can very much feel like we're not moving, right? I've had so many people say, I love the idea of what you talk about, but I'm in functional freeze and I can't move. And so I always say, I hear you, and your freeze has movement.
Welcome to Season of Stuck, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the all-too-human experience of feeling stuck. I'm your host, Deanna deBara, and on this podcast, we explore all things stuck. How and why stuckness happens, what it feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately, how to get unstuck and move forward in an authentic, empowered way. If you are looking for insights, support, and community as you make your journey from stuck to unstuck, you're in the right place. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new here, which you're all new here because this is a brand new podcast, my name is Deanna. I am your host, and I am so excited and grateful that you are here listening. Thank you. Now, since this is a new podcast, we're just getting to know each other. I want to give you a little bit of backstory before today's episode. So I know you don't know me, but if you did know me, you would know that I am not what you would call a graceful or coordinated person. I trip, I fall, I bump into things more than is reasonable for a 39-year-old human. I love being active, but generally I stick to activities that require like the bare minimum of coordination, like hiking, which is basically extreme walking, at least the way that I do it. So you can imagine my hesitation when a little over a year ago, my bestie invited me to a dance class. Dance is like the sport of coordination and grace. And my immediate response was, that is a hard pass. But at the time, I was really struggling. I had a serious case of stuck. My business had stopped feeling like the right fit, and I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't even know what I wanted to move forward to. And I had tied so much of my identity into my business and felt like my worth was directly correlated to how successful that business was. And so as my business struggled, my self-worth and confidence took a serious nosedive. I had tried so many different ways to get out of the stuck. I tried talking my way out of it. I tried thinking my way out of it. I tried rationalizing my way out of it, but nothing was working. And I kind of realized that my brain was just not doing the job. And so maybe if I wanted to get unstuck, I should try getting unstuck through my body. And so when that dance class invite came, I decided to go. And I was like super nervous. I was worried that I'd feel self-conscious or spend the entire class thinking that everyone was looking at me and judging my moves or lack thereof. But the environment of the studio was like so immediately warm and welcoming and inviting and inclusive that actually there was like nothing to feel self-conscious about. And I pretty much immediately felt at ease and was able to just get into the class. And it was crazy. For that hour, I did not feel stuck. I wasn't thinking about what a failure I was or all the ways I was falling short. I got out of my head and into my body, and I stayed there for the entire class. I felt joyful, I felt present, energetic, all of these things that have been missing in my life for months. And so I kept going. And those hours I spent at the dance studio are ultimately what ushered me out of my stuckness. They helped me reconnect with myself, identify what wasn't working with my business, and figure out what I wanted to do next, which, spoiler alert, you are listening to right now. I'm still dancing, and I really wanted to understand why movement was such a powerful tool in helping me to get unstuck. And that's how I connected to today's guest. Erica Hornthal, known as the therapist who moves you, is a licensed clinical professional counselor, board-certified dance and movement therapist, and founder and CEO of Chicago Dance Therapy, a practice that combines traditional talk therapy with body-centric modalities to help foster the mind-body-spirit connection. She is also an author. Her book, Body Aware, Rediscover Your Mind-Body Connection, Stop Feeling Stuck, and Improve Your Mental Health with Simple Movement Practices, is an exploration of how movement impacts both mental and emotional health, and how changing your movement can actually help you change your life. During our conversation, Erica had so many incredible insights to share, including the role that movement plays in stuckness and how to use movement, including dance, as a way to make that journey from stuck to unstuck. Let's jump right into my conversation with Erica. Hi, Erica. Welcome to Season of Stuck. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk.
I am so excited to talk with you. I am by no means a trained dancer or a good dancer by any stretch of the imagination, but I have recently started dancing as part of my healing journey, and it has been insane, profound, all of the good things. So I'm so excited to dive into this and understand why this modality is so powerful.
I'm happy to be here and talk about it. So
Yeah. So I guess to kick things off, for people who aren't familiar with the term, what exactly is dance or movement therapy?
Yeah, dance movement therapy is a creative arts therapy. I say that because people don't even realize that they're familiar with creative arts therapy until they hear the words music therapy or art therapy, which is much more mainstreamed. So it's a form of, it's under the umbrella of creative arts therapies. It's a psychotherapy that uses movement, body awareness, proprioception, elements of dance and improvisation to help integrate mind, body, and spirit, to help connect us to ourselves, to improve our mental health, and to support overall growth and development.
And what inspired you to become a dance and movement therapist?
I have identified myself as a dancer most of my life. And when it came time to finding a career, it was really a struggle to let go of the dancer in me. I knew that I wasn't going to be a professional dancer. I didn't really want to be a professional dancer, but I was very realistic with my own capabilities and just knew that wasn't going to be in the cards. I also knew that I was not cut out to be a studio owner or a dance instructor. And so I felt like that left me with very few options. So I started to rely more on my love of science, started to take some psychology classes, and realized how accessible and normal I felt when I was reading about cognition and behavior. And it was at those crossroads, basically, that a professor told me about the field of dance movement therapy and said, if you have a love for both things, you could marry them and create a career out of it. She herself was not a dance movement therapist, but she was very well versed in the field, had recently created a dance in medicine program at the college. And yeah, that changed everything. I had no idea what it was, just like most people when they hear it for the first time. But there was something in my body, like every cell of my being, that was just like, yeah, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then my mind was like, what? What are we doing? What have we done here? But I guess that was my first example of almost like following my body, listening to something that I didn't quite understand. And that was a little over 15 years ago. So it's been a ride.
That's so interesting because you talk about how dance movement therapy is about integrating the mind and the body and the spirit. And as you were going into dance therapy, there was that disconnect between your mind and your body telling you two different things. So it's so interesting how what you would ultimately end up helping other people with is what you were dealing with as you were getting into your field.
Absolutely. Even going through schooling, I still, to this day, I'm a very heady person. So I write about this in my book too, that it will, I think, always be a challenge for myself that I go to mind first and then body, but the rate of translation has certainly lessened. And it's not just a habit now. I've really built in that muscle, that practice of listening to my body, at the very least within seconds of listening to my mind. But that it's really, I have to be proactive, just like with my clients. I haven't been the kind of person that I'm not necessarily, let me dance this and then I'll talk about it. I'm always like, let's talk about it and then I can move it, even though I'm moving the whole time. So I appreciate you pointing that out, not even realizing myself that, yeah, I've always been in this mind-body split. And even as a dance therapist, it doesn't mean that they're always in cahoots, but just recognizing that they are connected. And that if I want to change my mind. It benefits me to change the way I'm moving my body.
I'm the same way. My mind is my primary language. It is always the first place that I go and the place where I try to work things out. And in your book, Body Aware, which I loved, by the way, it was like aha moment every other page. You talked a lot about the different languages that the mind and the body speak, and that really resonated with me. You use an avatar in your book where you say, there's a 30 something person who's been in therapy for 10 years and has hit a wall with talk therapy. And I was like, hi, that's me. Hello. I think that obviously having an intellectual understanding of things is important to understand why we are the way we are and why we do the things we do. But it really only takes you to a certain point. And once you hit that point, you really have to bring the body into it in order to continue growing, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what so many of us are trying to repattern began at a very young age. And in order to go back and really revisit those patterns, we have to dive into the language of childhood. And that's not cerebral. It's not cognitive. We didn't have those processes available to us. Most of us don't until we're like 20, 21, and sometimes not so much. So we confuse being able to talk with being able to process and understand what we're experiencing and where our behavior has come from. And so at the end of the day, if we really want to explore that, we have to go back to the first language, and that's body, that's movement. So think of the last time that you felt free from judgment, probably when you were dancing in the grocery store at 3, listening to the music and dancing up and down the aisles, like dance like nobody's watching. Nobody does that once they have cognitive awareness of how people could perceive what they're doing. So going back to the body feels foreign because it's been so long since all of us have done it. But at the end of the day, we can talk till we're blue in the face and really circumnavigate or deny a lot of the reasons why we're in therapy to begin with.
And you're right. This kind of body awareness and freedom in the body is something that we're all born with. But society values the mind so much. And so much of our structure is directed towards the mind that it can be easy to forget the body. And we get stuck because we're only using one part of our processing power, which is our mind, and we're ignoring the wisdom of the body. So it's really good to see there does seem to be a shift where more people are talking about somatics and grounding in the body and the power of the body for healing. So that's been really exciting to see and really exciting and powerful to experience.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a little frustrating for me as a dance movement therapist because just from the perspective of the professional field, we're not really part of that conversation. And so it's so frustrating to say the least because we have been having this conversation for so long. But at the end of the day, to just see that the conversation is happening, I would agree. It feels good for me personally. It feels good professionally. It's really difficult when you say the world revolves around thought. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't call people thought leaders. And so we really do rely on insight and intellect, but we can't intellectualize all of what we feel. And so for us to try to understand and reason why we feel what we feel, we're going to keep spinning our wheels. And so I think trauma has been one way that people really jump on board with that because there's the permission that you aren't the event. It's how it's perceived. It's how it's integrated or disintegrated in a sense into your body and mind that we can't explain, but we sense. We're like, I can't explain why this is happening, but here is the construct. Here's the science behind it. And I feel it. And that's proof enough. So I think people are starting to, take more notice, turn their heads, especially when it comes to trauma. And my personal feeling is I'm waiting for the day that we expand beyond trauma because everything is embodied. If you want to change your relationship with your anxiety, change your trauma attachments, change your relationship with your spouse, like everything comes down to how we show up non-verbally. And that's hard because it's not the go-to or the mainstream curriculum when it comes to psychotherapy and counseling.
As you say in your book, your issues reside in your tissues.
Right, right. That's such a cliche saying, I think, in somatic circles. I remember writing that and I was like, who do I attribute that to? Because I didn't come up with it, but I remember hearing it and I say it all the time. And it was just kind of like, well, it's common knowledge in somatics. I was like, okay, but it really rings true. And when people read that for the first time or they hear it for the first time, it clicks. There's a lot of like, oh, I don't even see my tissue. If I'm lucky enough never to have a cut deep enough to see, I don't even know what's going on beyond the surface. So I rely on what I think, and to feel can feel very unsafe or very uncertain. But quite literally, our body is carrying everything we've ever encountered. And some of that's good and some of it's not so good. And so if we want to uncover it, we really have to start to delve into parts of our body, like our fascia, like our tissues, like our muscles, like our bones, which feels very elusive, feels very like, what? How do I do that? How do I do that in therapy? Because I'm not manipulating people. I don't do body work. I'm not working on alignment. It really comes down to that innate awareness, realizing that you are the only one that knows yourself and that only you know what it's like to be in your body.
So movement plays a really big part in stuckness. And I saw a lot of that in your book. And it was so eye-opening for me because when I think of movement, I am thinking of exercise. I'm thinking of dance. I'm thinking of going for a run, even walking. You talk a lot in your book about how we're moving all the time. Breathing is a movement. These micro movements that we experience during the day are influencing how we feel, how we behave, and ultimately if we feel stuck. So what is actually happening? Like, how do movements influence the way that we feel and show up?
So the way I like to think of it is movement creates momentum. Momentum creates initiation or initiative. So if we're feeling stuck, it can very much feel like we're not moving, right? I've had so many people say, I love the idea of what you talk about, but I'm in functional freeze and I can't move. And so I always say, I hear you, and your freeze has movement. How you show up in your freeze still has a movement pattern attached to it. Because again, at the end of the day, how we are wired in our brain comes through how we interact with the world around us, right? So how we're moving in the womb, how we move when we're birthed, how we support ourselves, how someone carries us, how someone nurtures us or calms us down or keeps us agitated. So originally, like everything is through movement, it's through feedback, it's through senses. When we talk about the brain, like that's the part of the brain that's developed. Our prefrontal cortex is not intact for many, many years following that. So what we're dealing with is what people will call the primitive, right? Like more primal part of the brain. Then we move up into the limbic system, which is emotions, which is why we see a lot of tantrums as kids are growing up. Like we just have these big feelings and we don't know how to process them or talk about them. So we really have to go back to those origins. And when we're feeling stuck, it's almost like we're back to those younger movement patterns. And so to go from that bottom up approach, we have to get back into movement. We have to get back into the body. So even a small shift in posture, just recognizing how you show up in that stuckness and moving beyond that or changing your perspective in that is enough for many of my clients to get moving again. And that's not to say that it's permanent because the habit is the freeze. So we're going to go back there. Things out of our conscious awareness are going to bring us back there very easily. When we're aware of it, we can use movements to help facilitate more momentum and help us get unstuck. I love what Britt Frank says about that we're never unmotivated. Like we're always motivated for something. And so even in your stuckness, it's not lazy, it's survival. And if all you're motivated to do is to stay frozen because of fear or anxiety or threat, we don't want to demean ourselves for that either. We have to get out of that judgment of, oh, I'm not doing enough. Oh, I'm too lazy. I'm doing everything I need to do to survive right now. And when we feel like we're held in that and we feel more secure in our environment, then it feels safe to move or move beyond what we're already doing. I hope that answers your question. That was a little like
no, it does. That was so
roundabout.
helpful. Also, I love Britt Frank. She's amazing. So you touched on something that is really important, and really much of your book is built around this, which is awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like there are movements associated with stuckness, and in order to get unstuck, you change your movements.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be hard. So I'll just speak for myself. There are times that I am so out of my body that I feel completely unaware of what is going on. Like, I don't know that my posture is slumped. I don't know that I am contracting my muscles. There is like a lack of awareness. And before you can change your movements, you need to be aware of them. So what does that look like? How do people become more body aware so they can understand how their movements are influencing their stuckness and move in a different way to get unstuck?
I go back. So I want to meet people cognitively, right? Therapy, well, much of change in general, but therapy is all about meeting the person where they are. So for me to say, oh, you're out of touch with your body, let's go right into the body, would actually contradict where they are. So just like we would ask someone, how are you feeling? How do you feel? Tell me what you feel. I flip it and I say, how are you moving? And so that's what we want to cue ourselves to, whether it's setting a reminder in our phone, writing it on a Post-it, putting it somewhere visible, right, where I am a lot, so that I can start to cue myself to be more aware of my body. At the end of the day, it does translate, and eventually you will start to think of it without even needing to be reminded. Just like we do with feelings, where we can say, oh, I'm not in touch with my feelings. And then after a while, we're very in touch with them. We talk about how we feel all the time. So we need to do the same thing with our body. And we don't know what we don't know. And so we can't know what we're experiencing in our body until we give ourselves the opportunity to really uncover it and be with it. It doesn't have to be from such a conscious place, but for a lot of us who are stuck in our heads, that's really where it has to start. We have to look at it from this cognitive perspective and then reintegrate, right? Reconnect mind and body so that they can have a dialogue together, so that they can actually learn to speak each other's language.
And so once that body awareness is there, how can movement actually help you get unstuck? Like, what's going on in the brain and body when you change your movement that allows you to feel more open, more possibilities, and go from a stuck place to a place where you feel you have forward momentum?
Yeah, I mean, scientifically, we're actually changing the wiring of the brain. So something as simple as clasping your hands together, that often feels comfortable, familiar. I always ask people to switch the way your thumbs are facing and then all of the other fingers. And usually that doesn't feel, sometimes it just feels downright awkward. Sometimes it just doesn't feel as comfortable. But that is in real time feeling the effects of changing my movement to actually change the neural pathways in my brain. The more comfortable something feels in my body, it actually proves that I am expanding the connections, the wiring in the mind. For some reason, I feel like bringing this study up, and I'm blanking on the actual name, but it's a very well-known Alzheimer's study where they took a group of nuns who all had markers for Alzheimer's disease, but had none of the symptoms. And what it came down to was basically cognitive reserves. They had so many neural pathways built in their brains from years of prayer and study and practice and puzzles and language that it wasn't impacting their body and mind the same way that it would if someone didn't have all of those cognitive reserves. So that's what we're talking about. The more we move, the more range of motion we have at our capacity, the more pliable and flexible we are, not just like lifting our leg over our head, but more fluidity we have in our body, the more we build our cognitive reserves. So that's not to say that we're not going to experience those symptoms of, say, dementia. But what I can guarantee is that it helps emotions move through us more fluidly. And that's usually what keeps us stuck. If we have an emotion that's debilitating, that's overwhelming, that we don't know how to process, we freeze or we run away. We don't know what to do with it because we can't face it. We learn to move in different ways and the emotion moves through us. And it really changes everything. So We're talking about quite literally building new pathways in the brain. I talk about it as detours. If you had to get from point A to point B and there was a detour, usually we say, oh, not going there today. But if we build in a detour, we have lots of ways to get to from point A to point B. So we have to also think of options. I love the word options because movement helps build in cognitive options where quite normally we might think of like a black and white experience. Either I do it or I don't. I am or I'm not. Movement says, what is? What can I do in this moment? How do we get there?
There are so many different ways to go from stuck to unstuck. But one of the most productive, learning. Learning something new can help you expand your skill set and find new interests, and in the process, help you get unstuck. And if you want to learn something new, you will definitely want to check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes designed to help you learn, grow, and tap into your creativity, all of which can help you make the journey from stuck to unstuck. And right now, Skillshare is offering a free month to new members. If you want to access Skillshare's entire library of classes and get the education and instruction you need to shake off the stuckness, just visit seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare and sign up for your free trial today. Again, that's seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare. It's really interesting because we're talking about how when you feel stuck or you're feeling an emotion, movement can help you move through that and get to the other side. But the opposite, the inverse, is also true in that the way that you move, or in many cases, the lack of the way that you move, can actually make you feel stuck.
Yes.
So I know for me, it's like I have a terrible habit of working in bed. I just get comfy and I get snuggled up and I'm just on my laptop. And every once in a while, it's fine. But if I do it for a stretch where I'm just pretty stationary all day and my legs are flat and my posture is slumped, within a few days, I feel anxious, I feel depressed, I feel unmotivated, I feel stuck. And then once I get up and get moving and go and work somewhere else, I can shake those feelings off. And so that movement or lack thereof directly impacts how I feel.
I get that a lot because we're in this cognitive space. We're always like, well, no, my thoughts influence how I move. It has to be one or the other. Again, that binary thinking. And I'm like, you're right. How you think does influence how you move. But we forget the beginning of that. It's like the chicken or the egg. But we forget that first there was movement. There was some type of sensory input. There was some spark. There was some reflex, whatever word you want to use, that actually contributed to the formation of that thought. But then you're aware of the thought. And so then you become aware of the movement. So we're like, well, no, I was anxious and then my body froze. You're like, true. And what led to the anxiety? There had to be body cues, something. Oh gosh, it was really, the lights were overstimulating. Oh, the music was really loud. Someone was screaming at me. My clothes were really restrictive. It's like, oh, so there was an egg before that chicken, And that's hard for people to understand because one, it's not the main narrative, but two, because we're so used to coming at thought is first. Thought reigns supreme. So everything is after that. But both are true. Movement comes before thought, but then honestly, like movement comes after thought. So that's why I love asking that question of like, oh, how am I moving? Because it's not about which one's right, which one's wrong. It's interrupting the pattern so that we're aware of it in the moment. Maybe I wasn't aware of the anxiety building, but now that I'm aware that I'm anxious and I'm thinking these negative thoughts, now I can be present to how my body is showing up. And when I change my body in little ways, I can alleviate a lot of those negative or overwhelming ruminating thoughts. So thank you for that example, because as you were talking, I was even thinking of, it wasn't something I could really put in the book because I was going through it at the time, but I was thinking about COVID, that when the pandemic hit, we were told to lock down, many of us, and regardless of your stance on that, my feeling was like, okay, I'm going to hunker down. I had a newborn at home. I get very triggered myself by medical things and health anxiety. So I was like, I'm going to stay home because then I can't catch it, And that was good for 6 weeks and then 8 weeks and then 12 months and then 2.5 years. And oh my God, at the end of the day, I had to ask myself, how am I moving? And I wasn't. I wasn't moving. I was in this functional freeze. And that was actually starting to have a negative impact on my emotional health. So wherever we can build in that awareness, it doesn't matter where in the process the chicken or the egg is, we just have to bring attention to it. And that at the end of the day, yes, thought creates movement, but movement creates thought.
It's a circle. It's a cycle. They're all connected.
Circle of life, right? It's the circle of mental health.
Yes, I'm here for it. So when we're talking all about this, about movement and stuckness, where does dance fit into all of this? Why is dance such an effective way to move for improved mental health?
Such a good question. So I have to start with redefining dance. So that's what I did in Bodyware. I was like, let's redefine movement. I don't think that I had written this in the book because I think it was an aha moment I had probably post-production. But I started to realize, gosh, I need to redefine dance because we have this very selective view of what dance is. And if we don't measure up to it, then it's not for us. And so quite honestly, I was like, what does Google have to say about it? So I Googled dance, and one of the first definitions that came up was from Britannica.com. And it differentiates between dance as an art form and dance as communication, basically. And so the definition I use in dance movement therapy and with my clients is exactly what Britannica.com says, that dance is rhythmic movement of the body that expresses a thought or an idea. That's it. And so when you think about that, you're like, wait, it's rhythmic movement of the body. Okay, I do that. Like my heartbeat is rhythm, the way my eyes blink, the inhale and the exhale of my breath, that's rhythm. Doesn't say music, doesn't say coordination. Rhythmic movement of the body that expresses a thought or an idea. I'm like, well, if you have a thought or an idea, then you have the capacity to express it through your body. That is the power of dance movement therapy. That's why dance is powerful, because how many thoughts or ideas do we have that are never conscious, but also don't have language? Does that mean they're not valid? Does that mean they shouldn't exist, that we shouldn't express them, or that they don't need to be expelled in some way? If we get out of the mindset that dance is only an art form and that I have to have some set of skill to do it, then dance is possible for everybody. And then we look at the history. How long have we been dancing to celebrate, to grieve, to create ceremony, to create ritual? Like that's probably since the beginning of time. So the micro is like watching children develop, but the macro is watching society develop. And the more technological and cerebral we get, the less we rely on body and dance. And so for individuals like yourself, it's like this aha moment where we come back to movement and we're reborn. Like we experience what it's like to not care what the world thinks or how it looks as we're moving. And it's transformational. It really is transformational because it's really tapping into self. It is just this intuitive, again, that word primal connection to self, self-expression, self-worth, self-value, self-awareness that just can't be denied. You can't really talk your way into that. You have to feel it.
It's so true. And my experience, I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself, as many recovering perfectionists do.
We have that in common.
That if I do something, I have to be good at it. There was this sense of I was doing things to perform, and I could only perform at the highest level. Otherwise, it wasn't worth doing.
Yeah.
And because I didn't take dance classes, because I didn't feel like I could move in a way that was acceptable or impressive to other people, I didn't. And I kind of had to be dragged kicking and screaming to the dance class that I go to. My best friend is a dancer, and she was like, you have to check out this class. It's so much fun. It's so inclusive. You don't have to be a good dancer. And I was very skeptical. But then when I went, it reconnected me with the joy of moving just for the joy of it. I am not dancing because I want the person next to me to think that I look good dancing. I am dancing because it feels amazing to be in this body and to move it and to hear music and to laugh and to reconnect, like you said, with all of those things that make me human and alive. And it's a really beautiful, transformative thing. And in doing that, that has given me permission to do other things that I may not necessarily be good at. It unlocked so many things and gave me this sense of freedom. So let me just say to anyone listening, you don't have to be a good dancer to dance. I am a perfect example. I am under no illusions that I look cool or coordinated or any of the things while I'm dancing. And I have still reaped all of the benefits.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing is true for music. The same thing is true for art. It's like at some point, the narrative shifted where someone judged us for what or how it looked and said, you shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that. It doesn't look good. Or you have no talent or skill. And so, one, as adults, when we feel shamed or embarrassed for still dancing like a 3-year-old, well, hello, when was the last time you actually danced? Right? Maybe when you were 3. When was the last time you created art? Yeah, if it looks like 3rd grade level, that might have been the last time you stopped creating art. So I think bigger picture, you're tapping into creativity, and creativity has to exist. I think it's a human right, right? Like to be creative. That's where ideas flow. That's where life, meaning, purpose, spark, all of that stuff. And so just giving ourselves the capacity to create through movement, through art, through music, and not have it look like anything. When you see a creative arts therapist, we don't care about well, I shouldn't say we don't care about the product, because some aspects of arts therapy do have to deal with a product. There's something called performance as therapy, but that's a very specific piece. For the most part, we don't care about the product. We care about the journey. We care about the process. The product is almost secondary. So I'm not making dances with my clients. I'm not teaching them dances. We're really just tapping into that innate mover, that ability, like you said, to connect to not just joy, but all of my emotional experiences. That's so foreign to so many of us, because from a very young age, we were taught not to feel, told how something feels. Oh, you're making too big a deal out of that. Stop. Like, as dramatic sometimes as it sounds, I feel like if you're not dancing, you are denying the self. You are not stepping into who you really are in many ways. And will just continue to remain repressed and suppressed in a lot of ways. The sad thing is, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, that the way dance exists now as an art form, it's very oppressive in many ways. So I don't want to engage in dance in that way either. So if someone's like, well, dance doesn't make me feel good, it's not, you don't understand how my body moves, or I don't dance like the professionals on TV, I wouldn't want to engage in dance therapy either. But then again, redefining what dance is and looking at how movement really supports mental health, it's very easy to see that dance can be the most expressive, permission giving practice that we do in our lifetime.
You posted a quote recently on Instagram, and it resonated with me so much. It was, many of us are walking around feeling homesick simply because we haven't felt at home in our bodies. And it sounds like your definition of dance, this freedom of movement, is a way to come back home to ourselves.
I know it certainly is for me. I feel the most myself. I say this a lot. I feel the most myself when I'm dancing. And unfortunately, when life gets in the way, it's usually the first thing that stops, even as a dance movement therapist, because I can't get to class. My husband's out of town this week, and I was like, how am I going to get to dance class? Because I have to get to dance class. Like, I might kill someone this week if I don't dance. Just kidding. I don't really think that. But I mean, I think that I would never do it, obviously. But, my mental health says, like, I need to move. This is what I need for me, because I need to get back to myself. When the burdens of caregiving, even the burdens of just running a business, existing in this crazy world today, that is when I am the most me. And I recognize that that's not the same for everybody. So find out what your dance is. I'm not here to say everybody should be in dance movement therapy, although there's a part of me that really does believe that. But I think everybody should be in a creative form of therapy. If you're just talking, you're just skimming the surface. Find whatever creative outlet connects you to yourself. Maybe that's music, poetry, reading, journaling, writing, dancing, creating art, something like that. It makes a huge difference. It really does make a huge difference. So whatever your form of dance is, right? For some people, the movement practice, and that's why the dance hyphen movement, right? Because while our form of creative arts therapy is very much tied to that art form of dance, I think many years ago, the field recognized that not everybody resonates with dance, but that movement is accessible for everybody. So what is your movement practice of choice? Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's taking a walk around the block, running, Pilates, whatever it is. Embrace those movement patterns. Learn to move through things, move through life by showing up in our body. And without even having intentional cognitive awareness, just do it because it feels good. We're not really used to doing that. We don't create the space and time to make that happen.
That's so true. And I think for a lot of people, certainly was for me, part of the reason that we don't make time or room for that in our lives is because we're not sure where to start. Like, how do I start doing this? So for anyone listening who wants to start incorporating more dance or movement into their life, where would you suggest they get started?
Well, first I want to say also that I think the narrative very much is it's a waste of time. That, well, that's 5 minutes that I couldn't be working. Or how does engaging in dance for my mental health put food on the table? I think we all agree that working on your mental health is what allows you to continue to do whatever work you're doing. But yeah, that's a real concern, is like, how do I practice this? How do I start getting into it? So I think going back to what I said just a few moments ago is like, ask yourself, what movements do I enjoy? Maybe not to the degree where like, oh, I feel most myself when I'm doing this, like I said with dance. But what is a movement practice that I've enjoyed in the past? Maybe I took a belly dance class in college and forgot how much I loved moving my hips, or I want to get back to my roots of West African dance. And that allows me to connect to my culture and feel really connected to my body and to my environment. So what are the aspects? What are the things you're already doing? An example I love to give is cooking. It's not something I'm very familiar with, but
Same.
Cleaning, I would say the same thing. My son was like pretending to clean the other day, and I was like, wonder where he got that from. Who's modeled that for him? Because, oh my God, I don't think my house has been cleaned in a year. But anyway, but those are movements. So if you enjoy cooking, build more movement into cooking. Don't get the pre-diced chopped vegetables. Get the raw vegetables and cut and peel and dice and chop for yourself. That's a movement practice. We want to anchor ourselves to our day. So maybe every morning your ritual is having coffee. Make it more embodied. Smell the beans as you're putting them into the machine, or the steam as you're stirring your hot cup. Feel the warmth in your hands. Practice really feeling each sip. Like be more aware of what you're already doing. So many of us are just multitasking, so we're not even aware of the things that we think bring us joy. So yeah, ask yourself, like, what movement am I already doing, and what practices in those movements bring me connection and joy, and just do more of that. Then, like you said, when I started dancing, it was like, wow, what other risks could I take? You might find yourself like, oh, I signed up for this art class, or gosh, I went to karaoke on a Friday night and sang. Nobody was judging me. So you just never know, but you really have to like intentionally create that time and space to enjoy and start new habits. So I always say, meet yourself where you are. What are the things you're already doing? Because again, we're all already moving all the time. I think we're more aware of the movement we're not doing because we've lost it. You don't use it, you lose it. And so I'm really aware that I'm stuck because I used to be more mobile. So let's just meet ourselves in what we're doing already. Look at the movement that's present. Look at the things that bring you joy and connection, and just do more of that.
What an accessible way to start a practice. That feels like something that we can all do. So that's amazing.
Yeah. That's why like I feel a little like I almost get like a little stuck in my response, because in my head is saying, teach them something. Give them a tangible practice, like let's breathe in for 5 and exhale for 6. Stretch your arms out, which I've done all that too. But I think I'm getting to the point more where I just want to meet people where they are more and more in the practice and challenge them to create their own movement practice instead of relying on what I'm going to tell you, because it's going to feel different for you. It might not meet you exactly where you are. It counters this kind of instant gratification culture that we're in, where we're like, if we're not getting it right away, then either it's inaccessible or it's a crisis, and I'm like, no, you can do this yourself. What brings you joy? I don't know what that is. You have to think about how movement's already playing a role in your life and make that intentional choice to do more of it.
Is there any movement for you when you're feeling stuck that you find can shake you out of that experience?
Well, shake. That's so interesting that you said shake you out of that experience, because whether it's like an intentional shake or the fact that when I take myself to dance class, I have to shake. Like I do this cardio funk class. And so the movements that are in that class definitely are what I need, as opposed to like if I went to a ballet class. I've never been much of a ballerina, but I don't need structure and stability. And I say this very gently, rigidity in my movement. While there's also grace, there's a lot of fluidity in ballet, obviously, but I know what I need, and I need to shake it up. I need to drop into my body. I need to wiggle my hips. I need to body roll. I need to shake my shoulders and shimmy. That's what this class does for me. So quite intentional, I think, like shaking. Shaking is really what does it for me. Does that mean like in the middle of my kitchen, all of a sudden I'm like shaking it out? Not always. Sometimes I did that the other day. I was like, I could feel myself really frustrated and bound up. And I just went, just like shook it out. It didn't go away entirely, but it felt good. It felt so much better than just like holding on to it. So that for me, it's the intensity. I need to meet the tension. I need to meet the rhythm of the tension in my body. By the end of the day or the end of the week, I need that strong, or almost like more of a funky, sometimes like hip hop feeling. And then throughout the class, it changes. Like we'll do a stretching. There'll be a slow cool down. Then I can access the fluidity. Then I can access that grace and that elongation. So it looks a little different each time. But I think for me, it's like, what is my body craving right now? Just a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months now, I ended up having a really bad case of sciatica. My QL was messed up. My piriformis, just like hip, back, really messed up for a while. And I kept thinking, what should I do? What do I need? How do I solve this? And honestly, at some point, I just couldn't move. Physically, it just hurt. So I remember just laying down on the floor. I was like, this is the only position that doesn't hurt. And I just laid there for a little while, and I just started to notice my body was rocking. My leg was reaching. My body was telling me what it needed. So I started to actually increase some of those movements and really listen to it. And obviously also did like PT. But it was interesting when I went to physical therapy, they basically showed me the exercises I was already doing. I was like, my body is literally telling me what it needs right now. That's not to say that we don't also need medical intervention sometimes, but that's all to say, like, your body will tell you what it needs. So yes, for me, shaking, dancing, that really strong, hard beat is what helps facilitate unstuck.
You said it in your book. The body holds answers to questions the mind doesn't even know how to ask. Learning the language of your body reveals these answers. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I wrote that way before I wrote the book. But I think when I was writing the book, I was like, if I only know one thing, that's going in there. I think that was the first sentence I wrote.
This has all been incredible. So at the end of every episode here on Season of Stuck, we do a little round of questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So obviously, stuck is an experience that we all have in our life. I am sure that you have been stuck in the past, and chances are you will likely be stuck in the future. So thinking about the ideal future version of yourself, like the version of yourself that you are aiming to grow into, if she could come and speak to the current version of you, what advice do you think she would give you on how to get unstuck at this stage in your life?
There's a part of me that's thinking attach. Don't attach to words. Don't attach to what people say, which there's a part of me that knows not to attach to those things, but maybe it's the recovering people pleaser in me that just so badly still wants people to think that I'm good and nice and kind and go out of my way for people. Like I'm on my way to getting there. But I think that that's potentially maybe 20 more years down the line, what my older self would say is like, just, I almost had this vision of like words just bouncing off. Just let them bounce off. Instead, I think I let them stick. I pull them off eventually like Velcro. I'm like, I don't need that anymore. But I let them stay and linger for too long. And so that's what I would tell myself. Don't let the words stick.
Okay, I'm going to steal that advice for myself too.
Okay.
That's very good advice, and advice that I also need when I'm feeling stuck. So thank you. Okay, so then just a few rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you a question. You just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Favorite movie of all time?
Dirty Dancing.
Ooh, good one. Nobody puts baby in the corner.
Right. I think I posted that one time. Nobody puts body in the corner.
Oh my God, I love that so much. A Dirty Dancing meme all day. Go to coffee order.
Decaf latte, vanilla latte, something like that. Sugar-free. I don't know.
That's a good order.
Lots of milk, lots of sugar, no coffee.
I will take my creamer with a splash of coffee, please.
Yes, pretty much.
If you could have any animal in the world as a pet, what animal would you have?
Oh, I think I have to say penguin. Yeah, I've always just loved penguins. I think I would want them as a pet. My husband and I joke about like getting a really big freezer so that we could like have a built-in like freezer for a penguin, which somewhere a long time ago on the internet that was going around where someone had like a pet penguin and they sent it to the market to get fish every day. It was somewhere in Asia. I don't know. But anyway, I would want a pet penguin.
I don't know if I would get anything done if there was just like a penguin walking around my house. It might...
Probably. Yeah.
But worth it.
Me either. But yeah, pet penguin.
That's a great choice. And best concert you've ever been to?
I haven't been to a ton in my lifetime, but the most I've been to was Bon Jovi. I've loved Bon Jovi probably since I was in college. I got into them. And so maybe even the first concert I went of theirs was Tinley Park, Illinois, I think was the first concert I went to. So that's what I have to say, Bon Jovi. I've been to others, but hands down, that's got to be the first and the best one that I've ever been to. They put on a really good live show.
Follow-up question, favorite Bon Jovi song?
Oh, no. That's hard. You know what? Probably I'll Be There For You.
Oh, that's a beautiful song.
It is. Mm-hmm. I think it's the way he wrote it, or they wrote it. It's very poetic, but it's like classic 80s rock ballad.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's my favorite. Right now, that's my favorite.
I am a big like car karaoke person. If you see me driving in my car, I am belting out some sort of jam at full volume. And You Give Love a Bad Name by Bon Jovi is one of my go-tos.
Yep. That one, like Bad Medicine, like the rock songs that they're like really well known for. I found that once I started listening to like all the songs on their albums, I was like, oh, these love songs. Oh man, I'm a sucker for those.
Great answers. Erica, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This conversation was so enlightening and helpful, and it makes me want to get out and move. So I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for carving out time to chat with me today.
Oh, thank you. I always appreciate this time and space because I find that I get more in touch with my own thoughts and feelings around movement. So thank you for being a sounding board for that. I appreciate it.
So everybody listening, get out there, move your body in whatever way feels good for you, and get unstuck in the process. That's it for today. A huge thank you to our guests for their incredible insights, and a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We know that there are so many podcasts out there to choose from, and we are just so grateful that you chose ours. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider recommending the podcast to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy it. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you loved the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It plays such a huge part in getting this podcast out to a wider audience and ultimately supporting more people on their journey from stuck to unstuck. And to keep in touch and access even more stuck-related content, follow us on Instagram at Season of Stuck and visit our website, seasonofstuck.com, where you can sign up to get episodes delivered directly to your inbox. Thank you again for being here. It is so, so appreciated. Until next time, I'm Deanna deBara, and you're listening to Season of Stuck.